the patient's heart stops, not on a monitor somewhere in the future. Right now, under bright lights, mid-incision, with a chest cavity open and a clock that no one in the room dares look at. The surgeon doesn't flinch. She doesn't raise her voice. She simply says 4 words: "Start compressions now." In this moment, there is no fear, no hesitation, no room for doubt. Only 11 years of training compressed into a single decision made in less than 2 seconds. How does a person train their body and mind to stay calm when someone else's life is quite literally in their hands? Over the next few minutes, you're going to walk through a single day inside the life of a surgeon, not the sanitized version from television, but the real one. The 4 a.m. alarms, the 8-hour operations where bathroom breaks aren't guaranteed, the invisible toll on marriages, sleep, and mental health, and the specific moment, faced by nearly every surgeon at some point, when a routine procedure suddenly becomes a fight against time itself. Before a surgeon ever touches a scalpel on a real patient, they've already spent close to 13 years in training. 4 years of undergraduate study, 4 more in medical school, and then anywhere from 5 to 7 years in a surgical residency, depending on the specialty. Residents can work no more than 80 hours per week, no more than 24 consecutive hours on duty, and are expected to have at least 1 day off per week. In practice, the hours are relentless. Neurosurgeons and cardiothoracic surgeons often push past the decade mark in training before they're allowed to operate independently. And even with those regulated limits on paper, the reality inside a surgical residency is that exhaustion becomes so normal, it stops feeling like a problem and starts feeling like the job itself. Most people assume the hardest part of becoming a surgeon is the science, memorizing anatomy, mastering physiology, passing brutal licensing exams. That's the misconception. The real bottleneck is psychological endurance. Medical schools can teach you the location of every artery in the human body, but nothing fully prepares a 26-year-old resident for the first time a patient dies on their table, or the first time they have to walk into a waiting room and tell a family that the surgery didn't go as planned. Surgical educators have long said that technical skill is teachable, but the emotional weight of holding someone's life in your hands is something you only learn by living through it. One operation at a time. And there's one part of that emotional weight that almost nobody outside the profession ever talks about. We'll get to it, but first, let's start at the beginning of the day. The alarm goes off in darkness. For many surgeons, especially those attached to major trauma centers, the day begins before sunrise, often around 4 o'clock or 4:30 in the morning. There's a specific kind of quiet in a house at that hour. No traffic outside, no phone notifications yet, just the hum of a coffee maker and the mental rehearsal of the day's first case. Most surgeons don't eat a large breakfast. A piece of toast, a banana, maybe a protein shake, because a heavy stomach and a 6-hour operation don't mix well, and they know exactly what the morning holds. By 5:30, they're in the hospital parking garage, badge in hand, walking through corridors that are eerily empty compared to the chaos that will fill them by 9 a.m. The locker room ritual is almost sacred. Scrubs on, surgical cap tied, comfortable shoes laced, because today they might be standing in one spot for 6 hours without sitting down. Before entering the operating room, there's a 2-minute scrubbing at the sink, using an antiseptic brush across every finger, every knuckle, up to the elbow, timed almost to the second. Most people don't realize that after this scrub, a surgeon's hands must stay above waist level and away from anything unsterile until they're gloved. Even scratching an itch on their own nose becomes physically impossible for the next several hours. It's a small detail, but it tells you everything about how total the commitment is the moment you walk through those OR doors. The first case of the day is often the most complex, scheduled early because the surgical team is freshest. Under the bright, shadowless glow of overhead surgical lights, temperatures in the OR are deliberately kept cool, often around 65 degrees Fahrenheit, both to slow bacterial growth and to prevent the surgical team from overheating under layers of gowns and gloves. The room carries its own distinct smell, antiseptic solution, the faint metallic edge of cauterized tissue, and something sterile and clinical that most surgeons say they stop noticing after the first year, though it never fully disappears. For a mid-complexity procedure like a gallbladder removal or a hip replacement, the operation itself might take 90 minutes to 3 hours. But for something like a coronary bypass or a tumor resection near the spine, the surgeon could be standing at that table for 6, 8, even 12 hours. And here's one of those details that surprises almost everyone outside the field. Surgeons sometimes wear compression stockings, and in some cases, adult diapers, during marathon operations. because leaving the table simply isn't an option once a patient's chest or abdomen is open. Hydration is managed carefully in the hours before surgery for exactly this reason. The body's basic needs get scheduled around the patient's, not the other way around. The mental load during this window is relentless. A surgeon isn't just performing motor tasks, they're simultaneously tracking blood loss in milliliters, monitoring the anesthesiologist's readouts out of the corner of their eye, communicating with scrub nurses in short, clipped phrases, and running contingency plans in their head in case something shifts. Surgical teams develop their own shorthand language over time, a rhythm of requests and responses so efficient that an outsider watching might mistake it for silence punctuated by the occasional word, suction, clip, more light. To the team, that's a full conversation. If the morning's case is run on schedule, there might be a 30 to 45-minute window for lunch somewhere around 1 p.m. Many surgeons eat standing up in a break room, still half-dressed in scrub gear, scrolling through the next patient's imaging on a tablet between bites. It's common for this so-called break to be interrupted by a page, a complication in recovery, a question from a resident, an unexpected result from pathology. Some surgeons describe going entire 12-hour shifts without a real seated meal, surviving instead on granola bars kept in a coat pocket and whatever coffee is left in the surgical lounge pot from hours ago. The afternoon often brings a second wave of procedures, sometimes shorter but no less demanding. Biopsies, scope procedures, follow-up surgeries for complications from other departments. This is also when a surgeon's body starts to register the physical cost of the day. Lower back strain from hours of leaning over an operating table, neck stiffness from looking down through loupes or a microscope, and hands that have been gripping instruments with surgical precision since before the sun came up. Research on surgical ergonomics has consistently found that a significant percentage of surgeons report chronic musculoskeletal pain by their mid-career years, a statistic almost never discussed outside the profession. Because surgeons are trained to push through discomfort the same way they're trained to push through everything else. Between operations, there are rounds, walking floor to floor, checking on patients who had surgery the day before or earlier that morning, reading vital signs, adjusting medications, and having the harder conversations, explaining a diagnosis, describing recovery timelines, or simply sitting with someone who's frightened before their own operation tomorrow. This part of the job rarely makes it into television dramas, but many surgeons say it's where the emotional core of the profession actually lives, not in the operating room, but in those quiet hallway conversations before and after. For surgeons not on call, the evening might bring documentation, dictating operative notes, reviewing tomorrow's surgical schedule, responding to messages from referring physicians. For those on call, the day doesn't end at all. A trauma surgeon might get paged at 11 p.m. for a car accident victim, at 2 a.m. for a perforated appendix, and be expected to operate at full precision regardless of how little sleep preceded it. One detail that surprises most outsiders, surgeons on overnight call often sleep in small Spartan hospital rooms, sometimes just a cot and a landline, fully dressed, ready to be in an OR within 10 minutes of being paged. There's no winding down, there's no real off switch, and the moment that tests whether all of that preparation was enough can arrive at any hour without warning. It's 2:47 in the afternoon. The procedure was supposed to be routine, a laparoscopic repair, 90 minutes, home by dinner for the patient. 40 minutes in, everything changes. A vessel nicks. Blood fills the surgical field faster than the suction can clear it. The monitor's steady beeping shifts into a faster, more urgent rhythm. The room goes quiet in a specific way, not silent, but focused. Every unnecessary word stripped away. I need more suction. Pressure's dropping. Get me another unit ready. Somewhere behind the mask, the surgeon's own heart rate has spiked, but their hands do not shake. This is the moment all the training was actually for. Not the calm Tuesday morning gallbladder case, but this. 60 seconds where a wrong decision costs a life, and there is no time to consult a textbook, no time to call a mentor, no time to hesitate. The surgeon's fingers find the source. Clamp. Pressure. A controlled voice. I've got it. The bleeding slows, then stops. But the crisis isn't over. Blood pressure needs to stabilize, the anesthesiologist is pushing fluids and medication, and everyone in the room is watching numbers on a screen that will decide in the next few minutes whether this patient walks out of the hospital or doesn't. 12 minutes pass like an hour. Then the numbers steady. The bleeding is controlled. The rest of the procedure, once routine, now feels almost gentle by comparison. When it's finally over, the surgeon steps back from the table, peels off blood-speckled gloves, and exhales for what feels like the first time in an hour. Their scrubs are soaked through at the collar, not from the room's temperature, but from an adrenaline spike that took nearly 20 minutes to fully drain from their system. There's no applause, no dramatic music, no one outside the room even aware how close things came to going differently. In the scrub room afterward, the surgeon will spend less than 90 seconds on the moment before moving on. There's no built-in space in the schedule to process what just happened, and that will have to wait until much later, if it happens at all. The surgeon walks to the next room, washes their hands, and starts scrubbing in for the next patient, because in 20 minutes, someone else is already waiting, with a chart of their own and no idea what almost happened one room over. And that emotional weight, the part that gets carried home, carried into weekends, carried into years, is exactly what most people get completely wrong about this profession. The first myth: surgeons are wealthy the moment they finish training. The reality is that many surgeons graduate residency carrying between $200,000 and $400,000 in student loan debt, and their peak earning years don't begin until their mid-30s, sometimes later for subspecialties requiring additional fellowship training. Average surgeon salaries vary enormously by specialty. A general surgeon might earn somewhere in the range of $300,000 to $450,000 annually, and certain specialties can reach significantly higher, but that number rarely accounts for malpractice insurance, which in high-risk specialties like neurosurgery can cost well over $100,000 per year on its own. The income looks different once you run the math. The second myth: surgeons have nerves of steel and never feel the weight of the job. In 2025, 41.9% of physicians reported experiencing at least one symptom of burnout, with the highest rates occurring in surgical specialties. Urological surgery came in at 49.5%. The emotional cost of losing a patient, something that happens to every surgeon eventually, no matter how skilled, is rarely discussed publicly, yet many describe carrying certain cases with them for years. There's no formal debrief after a difficult outcome, no mandated processing time, no system built around the surgeon's mental health, the way there's a system built around everything else in the hospital. The third myth: the job is compatible with a normal family life. Divorce rates and family strain are notably elevated among surgeons compared to many other professions, largely due to unpredictable hours, overnight call schedules, and the emotional unavailability that comes from spending a day making life or death decisions. Missed birthdays, canceled vacations, late arrivals to dinner. For many surgical families, these aren't occasional inconveniences. They're simply the baseline of normal life. And yet, given all of that, the debt, the exhaustion, the missed moments, the emotional weight, surgeons keep showing up. The question worth asking is why? The answer, according to surgeons themselves, rarely has anything to do with money or prestige. It's the mother who walks her daughter down the aisle 5 years after a surgery that almost didn't save her. It's the teenager who returns to the football field 18 months after a spinal repair everyone assumed would end his athletic career. It's the specific, quiet satisfaction of closing an incision knowing that a problem which could have ended a life has been solved with your own two hands, using skill built over more than a decade of sacrifice. Many surgeons describe a kind of rare clarity that exists inside the operating room, a place where distractions disappear, where the outside world's noise goes completely silent, and where the only thing that matters is the next 6 inches of tissue in front of you. There's pride in that, certainly, but it's a quieter kind than most people imagine. Not the pride of being called a hero, but the private knowledge that when someone's life narrowed down to a single afternoon and a single decision, you were the person prepared enough, steady enough, and skilled enough to see them through it. That's not something you find in a lot of careers. And for the people who do this work, it turns out that's enough to keep coming back, day after day, 4 a.m. alarm after 4 a.m. alarm, for an entire career. If this look inside the operating room held your attention, drop a comment below with the profession you'd want to see covered next. The suggestions that get the most replies are the ones that actually get made into videos. And if you want to stay in the loop when the next one drops, subscribing takes about 2 seconds, and it genuinely helps this series keep going. A surgeon doesn't get to have an ordinary bad day, because on the other side of every operating table is a person who is trusting them with the only life they'll ever get. That is the job. Not glamour, not certainty, but the willingness to stay calm when everything else in the room says panic. The next video in this series steps into an entirely different kind of high-stakes profession, one where the danger isn't measured in minutes, but in depths beneath the ocean's surface. That one's already up. You'll find it right after this.